Well, welcome to the SEAM studio, ladies and gentlemen. In this series, I'm going to tackle formation flying. All right, we're going to talk in the next 5 deliveries about the different stages, and in the last stage, exactly the briefing that will precede such an exercise that you want to go and fly outside. So the next series of the basic flying we've got to start with the absolute basics. We must know the language, and then we must learn the no-goes in between so that we don't get hurt in the process. So let's get into section 1, formation flying types. And here you can see I say formation flying. By definition, formation flying is a disciplined flight of 2 or more aircraft under the command of a flight leader. And this is the first thing I want everybody to understand. It's a disciplined flight. We don't just gaggle together and now we've got a formation. Wrong. There is a process and a procedure and a training sequence and understanding that we must go through. And remember, that will go for the number 2, number 3, number 4, whatever, as well as the leader. Leading a formation is far more advanced. People think to fly formation is the difficult one. Yes, it is the difficult one. But if the leader is not good enough, the rest is really not going to become, or it's not going to be a proper sortie. Let's look at the formation types. First off, on the VIC, that simply means that the aircraft is situated in this kind of thing where they're in a VIC formation. Now, about this thing is that, you know, even if this is the only element, it's still called a VIC. All right? So VIC 1, VIC 2, VIC 3. So you can also have that as a VIC element. So don't think a VIC must be minimum of 3 aircraft. It can just be 2 aircraft. And because we are going to maneuver in terms of the VIC rules, and later on you'll see here we're talking about the echelon rules. So the VIC and the echelon, don't want you to get confused with those two at this stage of the game, but however, we are at this stage looking at then the line abreast. Quite simply, lead number 2. They are right next to each other. Now obviously you can be line abreast in either the number 2 position or the number 3 position, but it's where you will have a 90-degree out or a 90-degree out. Now the person that's looking at the other aircraft is not the leader. Right from the beginning, the lead is the brains and the eyes and the thinking mechanism, the cognitive part of this. The number 2 or number 3 or number 4, they simply stick to a picture for the type of formation that's going to be flying at that stage of the game. They're not going to worry too much about the peripheral vision. Right, so if I sit in a typical number 2 position, then my neck will have to go exactly 90 degrees to the left, and there I will move forward or left. Okay, so lead, in front, plan, see what we're going to do. Then the next one, line astern. Well, that's quite simple. There's an aircraft and there's another one behind them. And another one behind them. Line astern just simply means we're behind each other. Lead again, now the lead can't see number 2. Number 2 tucks in with number 1 underneath, and we will get to the details of these. Then we get to the box formation. Now, a normal formation where you get 1, 2, 3, 4 aircraft, this kind of formation is actually called a box formation. And that's why you will find that number 4, once number 4 is in position, number 4 will call in the box. Yeah, but Charlie, it looks like a diamond. I know, it looks like a diamond. But believe me, call it a diamond if you like. Then you must say, I'm in the diamond, but we're in the box. All right, diamond formations, normally you look at more aircraft, and then we will talk there about the diamond 9, and eventually if there's 4 right next to each other like this one now, that will be a card 4. Right, I think that the formation types that is used regularly will be your Vic, line astern. There is going to be a certain amount of line abreast, and then the rest of the formations will be a little bit more advanced for teams or whoever's going to do that. But if I'm going to start teaching somebody to learn, there's 3 positions: Vic, line abreast, line astern. And afterwards, you'd look at the box and the diamond and all that. It's just a combination of those positions. Right, so Vic formation. Now, the first thing that we can see is here at the bottom, I have drawn the Vic formation in plan form as you look at it from the above. And the first thing is to note the leader, number 1, to his right, to the leader's right. That is the number 2 position. So if we fly a Vic starboard, then there's only a number 2. There's no number 3. Otherwise, this is normal Vic. But you can also get number 2 into the number 3 position, and then he will just sit in the Vic's 3 position if you're only 2 aircraft. So you practice, because remember, the guy is looking like that, and the guy is looking like that. And believe me, over which shoulder you are looking, and how your hands are situated, and where everything is situated, and how you look, that gets embedded into you, and it becomes very, very difficult to just swap positions. But that's part of the deal. We want somebody to be able to fly all the positions, and then if we go to the next step where we say that we're going for competitions and shows and stuff like that, then we would train somebody for the number 2 position. We would train somebody for the number 3 position. Because when it comes to the finer skills and the quick thinking that is required in, let's say, display flying, then obviously you need to know your position and how to react very quickly. Number 2 is to the right, and must ensure that at least the wing length between the aircraft, and that is the distance between them. There you can see if there's a number 3 aircraft, that's a distance as well. And the next thing we say there is that the fore-aft position can be between half a wing behind the lead aircraft to 2 wingtips. It's just for instance, if I just take these little aeroplanes here, and I'm just going to show it towards you. Remember now that when we talk about the distance, this is actually what we're saying is that the length of this will be the gap between the 2. Now we can see that when we sit in the Vic, this wing can be opposite the tail, or it can be slightly back. All right, so there is a little bit of a leeway. And depending on the type, so the distance out and the distance fore aft, and then there is a little bit of a step down. You don't fly it as, it's just a little bit lower than leader. All right, but there's a few ways that we'll be able to think about that. And let's carry on. The number 2 and 3, and then we'll step down. Okay? Number 4, number 5, if we're still flown respectively, step down to number 2, step down to the guy in front. What I'm saying here is that if you fly behind each other, remember that there is a step down. So if you are flying the Vic, slightly step down. If you're flying line astern, slightly step down. Good. Now let's look at the Vic formation positions. Number 2 forms the first element. You will see that number 2 is normally the first one that will get into the element here. And the second element, 2 and 3, and must be the same height. So once the number 2 is in position, then number 3 gets in position, and you're looking at this line. And in this line, number 2 and 3, they must sit at the same height, and ideally, obviously, their angles should be the same. In other words, the referencing on the lead must be the same. And later on, we're going to see, what's happening. But look at the next sentence, because that changes the perspective when you get to bigger. I know that number 2 came in first, position number 3 comes in. But once number 3 has got its position, when you start growing that, when we start flying 6 ship, 9 ship, 10 ship, 50 ship or whatever, the number 3 becomes the anchor position. And number 2 is fluid. Because somebody in the formation must determine the fore aft position, the step down positions, and that goes so that this element between the 2 and 3 has got an anchor and a fluid. Now remember, number 2 comes in first, number 3 goes in now, number 3 picks up his lead, and then number 3 becomes the anchor for the rest. Doesn't matter how many aircraft come in now. So number 2 will be on number 3, the next row of aircraft will be there or in the box or whatever the case might be. Because you have to somebody. Now, at this stage, the anchor position allocated to number 3. If you obviously fly with only 2 aircraft, it doesn't matter because you don't need a secondary reference. All right? Also on this that I just want to know is that both number 2 and 3 is step down from the number 1. That's not an angle. This is height. And these heights, it's lower. Okay? So they stepped down. And you say to me, yeah, are they always stepped down? Are they always? So let's just, if we have these aircraft there, and we say, let's say this is the second, is it always stepped down? Well, imagine if it's a high wing. If it's a high wing and you step down, then you're looking into the wing. Where I can't see that aircraft. So in high wing aircraft, we step up the formation. So for now, general rule is step down in the Vic formation. But remember, helicopters and high wing aircraft, you cannot step down because the wing will be in the way and you cannot see number 1. And the rule is you have to see number 1 all the time. Why? Otherwise you're going to fly into him. Maybe? No, guaranteed. Okay, let's go to the Vic 2 ship, because we were looking at 3 ships now, and I said, you know, this element can, you can fly the Vic. Vic formation 2 is going to be arranged starboard or port, whatever. Vic formation number 2 will maintain the relative as number 1. Number 2 will increase the height. Okay, this is where the total trick comes in. Let me just, when you fly, and I'm just going to keep this aircraft here for now, in a Vic turn, the lead turns, but the other aircraft, you can see this one, is gaining height as you're going into the turn. In other words, a Vic turn is not like that. That's an echelon turn where they stay at the same height. But in a Vic turn, you'll see the whole formation does that. So this guy is now going to describe a bigger circle, and it needs to climb up. When you roll out, this guy just simply rolls out, but remember, he descends in that, and the speed now matches. And you'll say to me, is that a problem? I promise you, in a turn, the outside aircraft takes, to maintain the speed of the inside aircraft, it will need more power. So if we had a constant power that we were working on, there's definitely going to be. If you're on the inside of the turn, opposite, your circle that you describe is smaller. You've got to, as you roll in, descend in height, and that will mean less power. And that's the trick. How much less? Not too much less that you fall out of the formation and. But that's part of the practicing. Now they say the same principle applies for the Vic port formation. Vic formation is different from echelon formation regarding the height positioning. Okay. Later on we'll talk about, and I just mentioned the echelon now. The only thing that you must, and that's easy. When people fly like this, and you see it, They can be either in a VIC, let's say this number 1, and he's sitting on his left-hand side, so this is a VIC port. If he sits there, number 2, when the lead starts turning, this one will change height or not. Or if the lead turns and the roller's like that and like that. Now, the turns in an echelon must always be away from the elements. The element is on this side, so this guy can only turn that way. He cannot turn that way because the moment the other element does that, number 2, that's supposed to look at number 1 is blind. So in an echelon, if you're an echelon port, you can only turn starboard. If you're echelon starboard, you can only turn port or left. All right, we'll get used to those ones. Step down. We looked at a high or low wing. Remember, I said if it's a high wing like a Cessna or whatever, then there's a step up. There is no way you will be able to sit in the correct position, and the left wing, if it's a high wing, will definitely obscure the lead aircraft. That's a situation that is, you can't have it. All right. Turning is normally taught maximum 30 degrees, easily up to 45, and it depends on the skills capability and how much you're training. So in training, we normally start with maybe 15 to 20 degrees maximum, so that they can, as you roll in, the outside guy will have to open up the throttle to get there. The guy on the inside, as you roll in, will have to reduce the throttle because it goes lower, and he's going to have less power requirement to stay in the turn. So in the inside, your speed will be less because you're describing a smaller circle, and the guy on the outside is describing a greater circle. He's always got to climb up and the other, because that whole formation turns like that. It does not. That is an echelon way of turning. Right. I think I made the point there. Now the VIC with 3 aircraft resembles a V. There we can see it 100%. Depending on the direction, number 2 or 3, you will be either on the inside of the turn or the outside of the turn. And they're equally difficult. Once you've trained to be the outside, and let's say we're sitting here and you're on the outside of the turn, you've got to go up all the time, and all of a sudden you're in the inside of the turn, you've got to go down. And it takes a lot of practice to be able to maintain the picture and to anticipate what needs to be done to the power. At this stage, we must just know that the radii of the different aircraft at the different heights will differ. The speed will differ, and therefore the power required will differ. Lead's power will stay the constant. The guy on the outside that had to climb in a greater circle will have higher power than lead, and the guy on the inside will have less power than lead. Speed will have to increase because you need to keep your relative distance in a greater circle. The guy on the inside, the opposite. I feel like a fighter pilot when I use my hands so all across here. Okay, never mind. In a 3-ship formation is traditionally called stable, or the anchor determines the depth of the V and so on. And I think that we've covered that quite nicely. Number 2 maintains his step position down fore aft on number 3. So although, look, when you're airborne and you get number 3, it's going to take off number 3. But number 2 will directly fly to get into position. Number 3 will fly and get into position. Both of them call into position. Formation is now established. And now the anchor in this starts 3. So 1 doesn't look at anybody. 3 looks at 1. He's got an idea because he's looking towards the right. He will have in his peripheral number 2. Number 2 specifically needs to look, and he looks to look more left and right. So I don't want to say that number 2 is slightly more difficult because of that. But remember, we fly on, let me say, the averages. It's going quite rough inside the formation. From the ground, you can't see it. But in the air, it's a steamy thing. All right. Let's go to, oops, that was the wrong way around. Okay, this time around I've got line abreast. that's fine. There's no secrets or anything about this. Everybody is just exactly in the same line with number 1 is obviously the center. And this guy, number 2, and this number 2 will sit like this. Number 3 will sit like that. And look him. Fore and aft, up and down. And now the step up and step down and fore and aft positions are only taken from number 1. The spacing to the wingtips between the two. Man, it's difficult. So if you go to a place and you see where the guys are doing a line abreast loop, these guys are good. A line abreast loop, I promise you, it's one of the more difficult ones. Okay. All right. So lead aircraft is steady. Lead is the anchor. Step down is required from lead. This and between the lead and the other goes 1 wing. So there's 1 wing distance in here. It is so that you can touch wings, but just remember that if you're fore aft, there's no differential in speed. There's no hitting each other there. So if you're sitting very close to each other and the wingtips come very close, you just ease it in, ease it out, ease. There's a very small, no rapid, unless obviously you go totally blind, then you must know where the lead is, because you can't fly up into lead or fly down into lead. Not healthy. The lateral position is merely the outside aircraft must align wingtips, and the bank angle now, you'll see, is less. So because here is now very difficult to stay in there and to turn to the right, because the lead is still going to maintain the height and the power setting, where the outside aircraft will either climb or have to descend. Climb, radius bigger, descent, radius smaller, and that's going to make a huge difference in the power requirements. All right, there we go. So, line astern, everybody is behind each other, and everybody is just packing in. So you've got your aircraft there, and you've got the other aircraft line astern position, and the other one is line astern, and so on. So you've got this chain. All right, here you can immediately see that it is a step down. Now, whether that is a high wing or a low wing, the line astern, because in a high wing, you are not obscured right in front of you. Should there still be a big wing in front of you, depending on the design, okay, then line astern is going to be a little bit of a problem, because you can step up. There's nothing to say, but traditionally, all the steps are down steps, except for a helicopter. When you've got your helicopters and they are flying line astern, they do not step down, they step up. And that's got to do with a massive downflow from the blades. So here, it's very difficult for a helicopter, because the downwash is just so much more than a fixed wing, all right? And it's in your face. So there will always, in a helicopter, we do step up. So we do VIC step up, line abreast. You can maybe come to the same level, but always, I remember in the Alouette 3, this nut that everything hangs on, we used to call it the Jesus nut. And the thing is, you always fly that you can see the Jesus nut. So if you're at the same level, you cannot see the Jesus nut. But if you're up, you can. If you're in VIC position, you can. If you're in line abreast, you can. It means your blades are not running at the same level. Because if in helicopters, if you get a blade strike, the blades will always move in opposite direction. So it will be the rotation speed of this helicopter plus the rotation speed of the other helicopter's main rotor blades, and they're going to cut each other at that speed. And it's devastating. So step up. So yeah, do we still talk about the Jesus nut? I always say to the guys, you know, whatever you call you've got to look slightly down to the aircraft in front of you. It's okay. Number 2 aligns with the lead along the axis. Step back, half wing or closer, and then step down, just so that you stay out of the slipstream. And then number 3, This is just a quick tip there for number 3. Flies the average position and do not follow the variances. We see quite a lot. We've got the lead and we've got the number 2, and number 3 is sitting at the back end. I imagine here's a lead here, and there's number 2, and there's number 3. This one is solid. This one tries his best, and this one just tries his best at the back. So the number 3 will fly the average line, number 4 the average line, and so on. You cannot take all the mistakes or the problems into your hands with the guy in front of you. So lead will be steady. Number 2 will do slightly that. Number 3 mustn't follow number 2. Number 3 must fly the average position, and this guy, everybody's got their own problems. Okay? So don't fly on a problem, and that's why I say fly it on an average position. This is good information, all right? So once you brief for more than one aircraft in a line astern, you better talk about that, because number 3 is going to suffer if he's trying to maintain up to number 2, because number 2 is suffering to maintain a perfect position to number 1. The only one that's got perfect position is number 1. All right, after that, average lines. Okay. Let's go to line astern. Number 2 will have the sight areas flying. That's it. The meson 3 will react to number 2, and the whiplash and all that I'm taking. So we're looking at this mean line. So this guy will keep this, and this guy will start. He will struggle to move up and down, but this guy's up and down movement in trying to do the formation will be around the average line. And I think we made that now. Line astern, during the line astern, the lead does not make any calls for heading changes or height changes. That, as a rule, is not, you will just get into yours and say number 2, number 3 in position, and after that, lead will start and you just follow. It's follow the leader in a close formation pattern, but whether lead turns left or right, he's not going to fly into number 2 or number 3. And that is why calls are not really. If he's, remember now, you can't just push the aircraft down here. That's going to be then too much of a reaction. Lead must always fly extremely smoothly. You gain height and lose height very, very in a smooth fashion. Echelon. All right. Echelon formation is either part of starboard, turning formation away from the formation, and that's why I say if it is an echelon starboard, they can only turn port. If it's an echelon port, it can only turn starboard. All right? During the turn, the aircraft remains at the same height, so it's the same height turn. So the step down and the spacing and stuff, in other words, they're flying like this and they turn like this. They don't go up in the turn. So this is what we talk about, echelon. And the lead cannot turn in an echelon turn towards his other aircraft. So be very, very careful. If you want to call an echelon formation, you need to know what you're doing. All right? And mostly in the beginning we say to the guys, boys, just stick in the beginning to a VIC formation. Echelon, a little bit later on. Echelon, a little bit more dangerous, because if you sit there and he turns like that and he doesn't go down, there's going to be an accident in the making. Formation box. Okay, remember I said that this looks like a diamond. You can call it what you like, but actually, and that's why I said it's box diamond, box formation, regional 4-ship, number 4 slots into the box. So this is the box position that you're talking about, and as number 4 slips in, and the elements will fall up, lead, number 2, number 3 will get in, number 4 slips in the number 4 position, and once he is in position, we'll say 4 in the box. Then the lead knows that the formation was formed, and from now on, remember, all turns will be like in a VIC, and the climbs and descents are called properly, very smoothly done by lead. Okay. Sometimes they call a diamond. Normally more than 4 ship is a diamond. If we go to, for instance, this is not a box formation. This is now called a proper diamond. And there you've got your 9 ship. So in the 9 ship, you'll see there is a normal Vic formation, and there, in fact, is a box formation that's slot in. So I don't want to say that this is how you look at it. And we're not going to cover how do you form up, let's say, a 16-ship formation or a 50-ship formation in elements. But what I can tell you is that on average, if we've got very big formations, we like not to have more than 4 aircraft per element, and the element join the other element, join the other element, join the other element. So you will have 4 aircraft there, which will be joined by 4 aircraft there, which can be joined by 4 aircraft there, and so on, and so on. Don't necessarily want to get into that right now. The Cart 4 is line abreast, line abreast, line astern, line astern. And the question here would be asked is, but you know, who is tight and who's not tight? Number 1 is always the solid one, and number 2 only flies on number 1 for height and for spacing. Number 3 takes up direct line astern lead from here and becomes now the second anchor. And number 4 has got a huge problem because he flies that line and he must fly line astern for his spacing left and right. But when it comes to his height, he lines up with number 3. All that I want to say in the beginning is be very careful to just jump in with advanced maneuvers. First, just 2 aircraft until you can fly the number 2 and you can fly the number 3 and you can fly the different. But if you've got the Vic formation down pat and you've got the line astern and the line abreast, the rest are all just mixtures of this. And it does not really matter how big you make it then. The principles for the different elements that get together, that will stay the same. And then the principle for the bigger element the same. All right. So, yeah, if you've only got 4 aircraft, we always start counting 1 in the front, 2, and then 3. And you can see 1, 2, and 3. That element is there. Now, ordinarily, if there was an aircraft in the box, this would be number 4. But you can see that the numbering here does not work like that. There is now a specific numbering of this Vic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this sorted out that one and that one. And then, now you'll say to me, but why is this 6 and this is 8? If you start looking in here, then you'll see that everything to the right is even numbers. Everything to the left of the center line is, odds. If you look at the center line, let me just get a little bit of that there. If you look at the center line, there, you'll see there's a odd, even, odd, and so on. All right, but these are all evens and these are all odds. That's the easiest way for me to think. How do you actually number the more advanced? All right. That's then for this time to say, right, part 1, we're coming to an end. Let me wrap up quickly. The basic 3 formations, we always start off with Vic. Vic number 2 and Vic number 3. Line abreast number 2, line abreast number 3. Line astern number 2. You cannot play number 3 if there's not 3 aircraft. Okay? Once you've got those formations pat down and you understand the calls, how it works, now you start. When the lead is calling, line abreast go, line astern go. And we will talk about the lead a little bit in the next, how do you do the radio work and to change it. What are the tips What are the trade secrets? All right. For now, enjoy until the next formation session.